Welcome back. I'm going to show you the first of the three arrangements that we're going to do. This first one is called Au Naturel. And I have made this arrangement before at home in Ohio for my garden club, so I thought it would be a perfect one to show you. You want to have an idea in mind, and I said either sketch it out or take a picture of it, and so I did take a picture of what I want it to look like, or very similar to what I want it to look like, so I know what materials that I'm going to gather. So we've got some mother-in-law's tongue, some sea grape leaves, some juniper, this for filler. And so now I know how I want it to look, and I want it up on a pedestal. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the oasis, and this is what you start with to put in your container. Oasis is a wet foam, and you might find it by that name. And it comes in a block, and it needs to be soaked. And I soak it probably 24 hours just in a bucket like this, and that way it's just sopping with water. So after you've done your arrangement, you still have a lot of moisture in there to keep your flowers fresh or whatever you're using in there. So it comes in a block of this size, and it is soaked. I've gone ahead and cut mine. What I did to figure out, okay, what size do I need? So I take the oasis and I put it on top of my container. And then I kind of push down on it to get an indication in there of where I need to cut. I found a really interesting little knife at King's Florist in Bradenton, and it's called an oasis knife, and it really just slices through the oasis so easily that you can get any shape that you want. It's a nice clean cut on it. So if you're ever out that way, it's off of 41, and just before you get to the mall, or past the mall, they have these, and I think it was maybe $6, but it's a very handy thing to have. So I've cut my oasis, and I've angled it because my container is sloped, so I want it to fit in there, and I also want it to be above the top of my container. So if I'm going to be putting flowers in this way, or greenery, it has something to hold on to it. We'll give it some shape. And then when you've made your arrangement, then you have space in here to put water, and the oasis will continue to soak up that water and keep your flowers fresh. One of the things that I really can't do flower arrangements without is a turntable. And you can get these at yard sales or thrift stores. Just look around. Somebody's always getting rid of a Lazy Susan that they've had for years and don't need it anymore. And by putting it on a turntable or a Lazy Susan, you can see all sides of your arrangement, because you're not looking just at the front. You're looking at the sides, the back. You want a finished product all the way around. And I want to make sure that this is going to stay in this container. And so I have this florist tape, and it's narrow, and what I do is just put it on the container, across the oasis, see where it is that I want it to get stuck, trim it off, and you'll want to do it in two directions, just to make sure it's going to be where you want. You still have plenty of working space. Okay. Now you want to think about the line that you're doing. On mine, it's an L-shaped, so I've got my height here, and then it goes off to the side, but it also has some interest here. When you make an arrangement, your eye should look not only at the whole thing, but have direction. So as I look at this, my eye goes up, it goes out, it got a little extra over here. Your eye is always moving, and yet it all seems to fit together, so you have a line there. So the next thing I'm going to do is to get my tallest line material. Okay, I think this is the one I want. No, this is the one. And remember, I told you in just the description of things that however tall your container is, and this is 6 inches tall, then I want it 1.5 times as tall as this. You don't want it to look real squat. And so I pick out a nice tall center line and just eyeball where it is I want it to be. And that looks good. And so this is going to be starting my back. And I've cut this at an angle for 2 reasons. One, it'll absorb the water more, and the second, it will go into the oasis easier. So there's my main line that I'm going to do. Then I want to work in a pattern where I show depth. I don't want it to be all one-dimensional. I want you to be able to see in and behind and around the arrangement. And I have this, and I'm going to have another one that is almost as tall, but I don't want them to be identical. You want something with a little different design to it or shape, and so I found this one that has lots of movement to it. It's going to be almost as tall, but not quite, so I'm going to be cutting it off. I'm eyeballing it. Cutting it off right about here, and I'm going to cut this. Well, gets a little gooey. And as I said, I want something to anchor it in well, and so with this blunt end, it's not going to work that well, so I'm going to trim it up so it's going to stick in there. And I'm going to turn this around so I can see where I want to place it, and then you'll be able to see it too. I'm going to have it come forward just a little bit so there's a space there, and so you can see that now I've got my major line right in there. Shows 2 different interests. And now to fill in different places. So leaf manipulation is a great thing. These were straight just by warming it with my hands and rubbing it and rolling it, and then I secured it when I got the shape I wanted with a paper clip. When I take the paper clip off, I've got that shape. It's not as tight as it was, but it has the shape that I was looking for. If I wanted it that tight, I could either leave the paper clip on it, or these are sticky dots. And so I'd put a sticky dot on one side and then bring this around and tape it onto it. Or you could, if you have a, let's see, I have a 2-sided tape that's sticky on both sides. So if you need a bigger piece, you can use some of this 2-sided tape and hold it in place. But for this one, I'm going to just use it as it is. And this is another one that I want. I'm going to put it through this side, but it's going to show some interest. So now I'm making your eye go in another direction. It's still going up and down, but it's kind of going in another direction. I find where I want it, and I'm going to trim it up. Right in there. So now you see I have some depth going on in there. And now we want something to take our eye away from here and kind of shoot it out either to the right or the left. This leaf I manipulated it. It was nice and straight. I warmed it up with my hands. I kept twisting it to the way I wanted it. and then I put a paper clip on there, and when I took the paper clip off, it was the shape I wanted. So that works out that way. Let's see what I'm doing here. So now I want to make my lines going out this way. So I kind of measure and see where that's going to go. You don't want to fill up your block of oasis with stems, so just clip it at an angle. Kind of stick it in like that. And I want some more, and this shape is similar to that. So I'll trim it up. Okay, so you can see how my line is starting out now. So I've got it this way, your eye is flowing along, and then you can do some fillers with some smaller pieces, find some interesting. Most designers will tell you you need an odd number to make it more pleasing. Most of the time it works out that way, but some of the times it just needs that even number, so I use it this way. This one I did not manipulate. This one has the curve I want. And you just play with them, and if it doesn't look right, if it's not what you want it to be, then take it out and try something different. That's the nice thing about flowers. There's a lot going here. It's too tall. You need one little something right there. You see how easily you can bend it. Another little trick on if you want something to be a loop, and you want it to stay that way and it doesn't want to by itself, cut a little slit. Take a knife and make a little slit in there, and then when you bend it, you can stick the end through that little slit and it'll stay where you want it to stay. So if I needed this really curly, I would make a slit right here, put this point through there, and tape it with a sticky dot on the back side. So then I'd have a really nice loop. But it's kind of doing what I want it to do now. And if you just hold them for a while, I don't want to take too much time on this manipulation, so you can see how it's going to turn out. I've also found if you want something nice and round, you can tape it around a jar or a can overnight, and then when you release it in the morning, it's that shape. So now I'm getting some movement going. And I'm ready to now fill in some spaces. And on this, there aren't any flowers, it's just all greenery. And I have some lovely ferns. So this is now a new texture that I'm going to introduce into here, because I have all these nice straight lines. So I have a fern and I want to show some depth. So I'm going to get this stuck in here. So now you have another texture, another design right there. There's another fern, and I'm going to put it out front to carry this theme through. I don't want it as tall, so I'll snip it off and pull your excess leaves off so you have something to fit in your oasis. Keeps breaking. So I should cut it this way. Sometimes they don't always work out the way you want it to, so make sure that you pick lots of whatever material you're working with. Okay, so now we have some different texture and different design. Next I'm going to go with my sea grape leaves. I said some of them I've cut so they have long stems on them. Others don't, and so that's when I'll make them a little bit shorter and wire them in. One of the rules of flower arranging is you want your oasis completely covered. You don't want it to look like an after, or the base of it. You want it to be part of your arrangement, but you never see it, if that makes sense to you. And so you want to make sure that you've got something that's going to cover really well. And this is where I need my wire. And it doesn't matter what color you use, it's up to you. Off. And this is where I'm going to pierce a little hole into my leaf on each side of that stem, so when I put it, the skewer onto it, it's going to be secure. So I've done it like that. Give it a little twist so it ends up being basically one wire. Put my skewer on there and just wire it on. And so it's going to stay like that, and if it flops around, then you can tape it. Some with longer stems. You see how the arrangement is starting to take shape. You're getting the line that you want. Your eye is jumping around, seeing lots of different interesting things to look at. And now it's time to put your filler in. So I have this wonderful juniper. I went over to my neighbor's, and her little hedges need trimmed. And so I trimmed them for her. And she was grateful, and I was grateful. So the next thing you want to do is just start filling in. And as I said, make sure you have plenty of the material that you want to use. Don't skimp on it. And with this, I'm just kind of filling in holes, bringing a little of that shape, that curvy shape because this whole thing is really nice and curvy. And you can do all of this ahead of time. I just like to soak it to overnight so it gets the most water absorption that it can, and it stays fresher longer. And if you have a piece that's too long, you can snip it off because that's another piece of fillet that you can use somewhere else. And this is another one that you can wire to a skewer if you want, if you don't think it has enough stem to it, but you can get it to do what you want. Then just wire it onto something to hold it in place. So you get the idea of how it needs to be filled in all the way around. Fill in all your empty holes. Cover up that oasis. I love to just walk out in my yard and see what flowers are blooming and try to figure out what container I'm going to use to put those in. I try to cut them early in the morning while the dew is still on and the sun isn't real high. If you don't have that opportunity, then you might do it in the evening after the sun has gone down and the moisture sets in for the evening. So I'm not going to completely do this because I want to have time, because it does take time to fill in, but you can get the idea of what it's going to look like. So just take the challenge, look at it. What is my eye doing when I look at this arrangement? Is it just up and down? Is it moving around? Do I have some depth to it so it doesn't look like just a flat piece of artwork? And that's what flower arranging is, just a nice piece of art. And once again, just make sure that it's all covered all over. Because somebody, no matter where you place it, somebody's going to walk around and look at the other side of it. I'll show you. See, even the sides have some real interest in what's going on. This arrangement could be this way if you wanted to be. And that's our Au Naturel. This is our front view and side view. The back is completely filled in and around. And so you can see that every part of it is part of the arrangement. Whether you're looking at the front of it or the side, there's movement, there's texture, there's design. As I look at the back of it, I could have had another piece of this little aspidistra coming up this way, and that might fill in that little spot there.